Hello, and welcome to HHH, the podcast where we talk about those horrible humans in history. I am your host, Angela Pearson, and welcome to today's episode. First off, if you're liking these, make sure you're liking, subscribing, sharing with everybody that you know about. You can access these on any streaming service, so make sure you're telling everybody about it, especially if you really like these spooky stories. We want to share this with the people that we love, right? So also, if you're wanting to see pictures of the people that I'm talking about, be sure to follow me on Instagram. It's Horrible Humans in History. You can see the people that I'm actually talking about. It makes it come alive a little bit more. So follow, like, subscribe, share with everybody. But today we are talking about another fan pick. So shout out to Jason for this suggestion, and I am super excited because this is one of my favorite horrible humans in history. Just because of I guess he's famous and he's really well known, but the things he did were just so mind-blowing that it seems like it would be in a story. And speaking of, Transylvania, where this individual is from, resides within Romania. This is where our story is going to take place. And most people, when they think about Transylvania, up until the 1970s, actually, didn't know that the story Dracula actually got his name. Like, the character Dracula didn't get his name out of nowhere. It's an actual real person. It wasn't until the 1970s that people found out that Dracula was actually based on a real-life warlord. So today, we are going to be talking about Vlad Dracula. Vlad the Impaler is his name, and in my mind, his story is way creepier than the story of Dracula, because all of the stuff we're going to talk about actually happened, so it makes it so much worse. So guys, let's dive right in and talk about Mr. Vlad Dracula. Vlad Dracula, guys. What a cool name. I do have to say, Vlad Dracula sounds like a villain from a story, right? So he was a Romanian prince and was born in 1431 to Vlad Dracula II. We actually don't really know anything about his mother. I tried to find information about his mother, but was not able to do so. So I have none to give you guys. But we do know that his father was Vlad Dracula II. And the written records and archaeological records are pretty sparse when it comes to Vlad's story. But we have enough information to tell you the creepy tale of what he did and why he's so infamous. So he was born, again, if I mispronounce names, guys, just don't tell me. I know I did. So he was born in Zigishwara in the heart of Transylvania. His hometown was one of the safest places in Transylvania and one of the richest places in the area. It was full of Saxons and not Romanians. So Saxons were the Germanic people. They were from German descent. In case you don't know what a Saxon is, they actually came from Germany and came over to Romania. The Romans originally called Germans Saxons. So that's where that term comes from, specifically German pirates. So if I refer to Saxons, I'm talking about Germans. So just so you know, this is where, the history of Germany goes way, way back. So anyways, so his father went to a principality called Wallachia, and he actually bargained with the Saxons to allow them to live in the safety of the city. And his father was a prince of Romania, like a Romanian prince. And I will be honest with you, when I was doing the research, there was a ton of political stuff, a ton of background to his story. And maybe later I'll do a follow-up episode so you can hear all the nitty-gritty details of the politics and family drama behind the scenes of Vlad the Impaler. I'm going to skip a lot of that, mostly because there are so many Vlads in this story. I could barely keep track, and I think it would be even more confusing if I tried to explain it to you. Just know, there are lots and lots of Vlads in this story. Like, his father's name is Vlad Dracula II. His great-grandfather's name was Vlad Dracula I. And Dracul, just so you know, actually means dragon or the devil. But fun fact, the reason why he got that name was because he was inducted into an order called the quote-unquote Order of the Dragon. Ooh, it sounds really cool, right? His grandfather got that name because he was inducted into the Order of the Dragon. So at that point, they passed down the name of the dragon. And the Order of the Dragon was actually an organization of leaders in the area who agreed to fight against the spread of Islam through, and also fight the Ottoman Empire, which was one and the same, basically. They did not want Islam and the Ottoman Empire to spread across Europe, so they all joined together and pledged that they were all going to fight it in this Order of the Dragon. So, hence the name Vlad Dracul. So, it's Vlad the Dragon, basically, or Vlad the Devil. And it's pretty cool that they had this organization. It sounds like a fancy club, right? But it wasn't. It was just an organization to fight against the Ottomans. Anyways, so there's a lot of other politics and lots of other Vlads. So I'm going to try and simplify this as possible, and hopefully we won't get lost along the way. So Vlad was the second of 4 brothers born into this noble family. And it was a competition to see who was going to get the throne. I'll just say that much. In 1436, he and his family actually moved to Targovista, Wallachia, where his father actually assumed leadership of the Wallachian Principality. And in 1442, Vlad and his brothers were actually sent to live in the court of the Ottoman Sultan, Murad II. Now, let me explain why this happened, because I know it seems like it came out of nowhere in 1942, just to be like, oh, let's send you to my enemies, right? Well, this is what happened. So, basically, his father was caught between the Hungarians and the Ottomans, and they were both trying to vie for that area. And the area his father was over was teeny tiny compared to these other countries. And so his father would make agreements with the Ottomans saying, I promise I am not going to attack you. I will be on your side. I'll help you fight Hungary. Like, I am on your side. So, to ensure that Vlad's father followed through with this promise, because he had been known not to do such things, they actually kept his sons as kind of an insurance policy. So if he backed out of his deal or did something wrong, they had his kids. They could just kill his children. And spoiler alert, this insurance policy did not work, because Vlad's dad would actually turn on the Ottomans and make an agreement with the Hungarians. And thankfully, the Ottomans really liked these 2 boys, and let them live. And they actually treated them more like guests than prisoners. They educated them in science, math, the arts, how to become a skilled horseman and warrior. And his brother loved living with the Ottomans. He thrived there. He absolutely loved it, even converted over to Islam. Vlad, on the other hand, although the Ottomans were super kind to him, he hated them. Absolutely hated them and did everything in his power to resist what was going on. And the Ottomans still liked him. They thought he was spunky, and they believed that he would be able to be used as a pawn in the future in political matters when his father left the throne. They would be able to use Vlad. So this whole time, they're thinking that, oh no, we'll use this kid as a pawn. While the whole time, Vlad the Impaler, to clarify which Vlad I'm talking about, grew to really hate them. Well, this hatred would increase exponentially in 1447 at the ripe old age of 16 years old. His brother, his oldest brother, so not the one that was with him, but his very oldest brother, he was actually killed, and his father was assassinated by the I can't even say it, Wallahian nobles, with the help of the Ottomans, by the way. So, yeah, they had a little bit of help from the Ottomans. And his brother was actually killed. So this time period just blows my mind. People were so brutal. I just have to throw that in there before I tell you exactly how his brother was killed. His brother was killed by having hot pokers stabbed through his eyes, and then they buried him alive. Sounds like a great time to be alive, doesn't it? just so wonderful. And then Vlad had actually, his father had fled and was caught, and they executed him. And I believe they beheaded him. I tried to verify that because I only heard that in one place, but I think that's how they actually killed him. So Vlad the Impaler, not Vlad the father, fled north and vowed that he would return and avenge his father. And oh, did he? Oh, did he? So he wasn't able to actually do that immediately, but he started his lifelong efforts to regain and hold on to his father's throne, which I will actually say was very impressive that he would do this, because he had to fight off the Ottomans, he had to fight off the Hungarians, he had to fight off rival royalty within his own court, and he had to fight off his own little brother, the one that went with him to the Ottoman Empire. He would try and claim the throne as well. So he had a lot against him and a lot of people trying to destroy him. So when he actually gets to the point where he holds on to his throne, spoiler, he doesn't hold on to it very long right now, but it's pretty impressive because he's got everything coming at him. So it's thought that the cruelty of the death of his father and his brother would actually be the thing that triggered how ruthless and brutal that Vlad later became in life. Because I tell you what, he gets brutal fast. But they believe that it was the death of his brother and his father that actually triggered that brutality. So the first order of business he had was to hunt down everyone who had betrayed his father. So he was actually released from the Ottomans when the news came about his father, and they ironically provided him troops that he needed to take back his father's throne, because they truly believed that Vlad was going to be loyal to them and that he was going to be their loyal subject and they could use him as a puppet, basically. They were very, very wrong, but they were so confident that they actually gave him troops to take his throne back. So in 1448, he was briefly successful in taking the throne back, but was deposed after only 2 months. So he was only successful at holding onto the throne for 2 months. And in 1453, so a few years later, the Ottomans conquered Constantinople. Now, I don't know if this happens to you guys or if it's just me, but anytime I hear the phrase or the word or the name Constantinople, it's Constantinople with a P. I say it with a B, but it's with a P. I get that song stuck in my head. Remember how with Rasputin, I was like, yeah, you're going to get that rah, rah, Rasputin. Yeah. Same with this. Constantinople. You're going to get that song stuck in your head. And if you have not heard it, you should look it up. It's pretty good. But also, another side note. Sorry, I'm getting really distracted on this one. Anyone see the Tiny Toons cartoon where they use this song when they were little? Anybody? No, just me? Okay. Moving on. Back to actual history. So it was up to Vlad to keep Wallachia safe from the Ottomans. And he knew that because he saw the Ottomans conquering Constantinople, which was a really big, important city at the time. And so he knew that he was the last barrier between Europe and the Ottomans. So in his mind, he knew that he was the last defense from the Ottomans. So in 1456, a couple of years later, Wallachia was seized by Vlad. When he actually stormed in and took control of Wallachia, he decapitated his rival that had held the crown. So the guy who took it from him after 2 months, he fully just cut off that guy's head. And then after 8 long years of struggling, he finally claimed the leadership of Wallachia province. And this is when his bloody reign of terror would begin. So once he had his power, maintaining it was not easy. Like I said, he was fighting the Ottomans, the Hungarians, the royalty within Wallachia, and his own brother to keep hold of that crown. So he still had a ton of dissent among the local nobles. And as always, the Hungarians and Ottomans, they would have stomped him out if they could have. So to stop the dissent in his own nobility, Vlad arranged for a feast and invited all the other royals to attend. He invited them and they all had drinks, lots of food. It was this very lavish party and they all started feeling very important because, oh, look at him. He's throwing us this fancy party. After everyone had arrived and actually started partying and relaxing, he actually ordered that all the royals be impaled immediately. Yep, it took like just a couple minutes and boom. He was like, you know what? You guys were all traitors. Impale them now. Now, Vlad mostly would inflict this horrible execution style on foreign and domestic enemies, but he also would use it on the common people, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So impaling, I know it sounds pretty self-explanatory, but we're going to talk about it real quick. So just FYI, it's about to get a little gruesome. So impaling involved taking a sharp wooden or metal pole and how do I say this so it's not super duper graphic for people? They basically like shish kebabbed people from the bottom up. Like literally it would go from the bottom and sometimes come out the shoulder, the neck, or even the mouth. And sometimes they would even round the tip to avoid creating any immediate internal damage to prolong the person's life. So they would be impaled and alive on this giant pole. And this method like I said, wouldn't instantaneously kill you. No, it could be a pretty long, excruciating death. And a lot of historians think that he got the idea to do this from the Ottomans when he was living in the Ottoman Empire and learning from them and learning war tactics and everything. It's believed that he actually saw that the Ottomans punished people in that way. And that's where he got the idea to do it. And that's why he started doing it. So often to accomplish what they were trying to do, they would use a horse and lube to get the job done. I'll let you use your imagination on that one. After they would impale the victims on the pole, they always planted it vertically into the ground and made sure that the victim was on full public display for everyone to see, to show how long and how slow that death really was. So this man is sadistic, I will tell you. So he often would take people that he impaled and put the stakes of these people into different shapes outside the city walls of a city that he was targeting to cause panic and psychological warfare on the people within the city. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure that would work on me. If I saw outside of my city walls, like circles, like in patterns of people being skewered right outside my city wall, like I would freak out. I would run. I'm not gonna lie. I would run. It would be terrifying. And the height of the stick, just so you know, depending on how tall it was, determined your social status. The taller the stick, the higher your social status. The shorter the stick, the lower your social status. So yeah, so you could look out and see the rankings in society that these people held. And sometimes Vlad would actually make mothers impale their own children. How horrible is that? Like, this man loved playing with people's minds and causing trauma to other people while also torturing other individuals. It's ugh, blech. And he would also leave the bodies there for months and months as a warning to other people to say, see, this is what happens when you don't do what you're supposed to. Or this is what happens when you're my enemy. You will end up looking like these people. So in 1459, it said that he actually executed dozens of Saxon merchants in Kronstadt is how you say it, who were aligned against him. So he found out that these Saxon merchants were conspiring against him and had made agreements with the Ottomans and other people to kind of fight against him. And he found out about it. With those individuals, they got lucky because they just had the traditional execution of just being hung. Those lucky dogs. They did not get skewered. They were just hung. So, lucky duckies, I guess. There's also a story that in 1459, an Ottoman envoy came to visit Vlad. And we all know how much he absolutely loves the Ottomans, right? Like, some of his ultimate favorite people. So they came to talk to him and they refused to take their turbans off in his presence, citing religious reasons. They were just like, I am so sorry, but this is part of my religion. I can't remove this, so I apologize. And of course, Vlad just commended them for their religion and being obedient and following their tenets of their religion. And he was so impressed by the fact that they wanted to adhere to their religion so closely that he had their turbans nailed to their head so they would never be able to remove them again. So they would never break their religion. Sounds like a really good guy, right? Like, I don't know. So he was a no-nonsense kind of guy. Like, he asked you to do something, he expected it, and he was ruthless and brutal if you didn't. In 1462, Vlad reported to a military ally the extent of his ruthless campaign against the Ottomans. So, not only was he just ruthless to these random people, he was also ruthless in war. Like, he detailed the fact that he had massacred civilians in Oblukitsa and Nova Solo. They were important cities because they were right next to the Danube River and the sea. So they were really important trade cities. And he just massacred them. He destroyed all of them and killed everyone in those cities. And Vlad claimed responsibility for killing 23,884 people. Now, that number didn't count all the people he killed in combat or burned alive in their homes, because that's how they would kill a lot of the civilians. They would just lock them in their homes and light their homes on fire and let them burn to death. So that 23,884 people doesn't even count all the men that died in battle or the people buried alive. That's just crazy. That's so many people. And it's said that overall, Vlad is actually responsible for the death of over 80,000 individuals. Now, this part of the story is super wild to me. This includes over 20,000 people who were executed by impaling and displayed outside the city of Targoviska. Yeah, you heard that right. 20,000 people impaled and put on showcase for the city of Targoviska. Like, 20,000 people. It said that in 1462, as he was fleeing from battle, he actually left a field, like fields of thousands of impaled victims that went on for over 2 miles. 2 miles of impaled victims in large fields to deter the Ottoman forces from attacking his province. Now imagine you're a soldier with the Ottomans marching to take over Vlad's territory, and you have to march through 20,000 people who have been impaled. Some still alive, some have been there for a while. Like, now imagine you're a soldier marching through this. The thoughts you would be having about this enemy that you are about to face, I think I'd turn and run. I wouldn't really care about the consequences at that point. I'd just be like, you know what? I want to live. This is terrifying. And when Sultan Mehmed II was leading a force to attack Vlad and his people, they came across this forest, a literal forest of impaled bodies, and the horrors that Vlad had left for them to see. The Sultan was so horrified and disgusted by the sight and the smell of decay that they actually turned around and went back to Constantinople because they just did not want to deal with this psychotic man that would leave such a horrible thing for them to find. Now, the psychological effect that this had on the Ottomans actually was pretty long lasting, as you can probably imagine. They would withdraw from certain engagements just because they thought about the stuff they had seen on their way to attack Vlad. They thought about all of those bodies hanging there and the smell. Oh, the smell. Yeah, the smell would be so bad. It traumatized them so much that literally in future engagements with Vlad's men, they would just flee because they didn't want to end up like all the people that they saw. So, Vlad didn't just like impaling people. I know I've talked about that quite a bit. That was his ultimate favorite thing to do. He would also burn, he would boil, he would disembowel, and like I said, most favorite of all was to impale people. And those were all his favorites. And he would burn, boil, and disembowel people all the time as well. We just don't hear about that as much because the impaling's pretty crazy. So, and his cruelty wasn't actually just saved for the people where his military or political enemies. He didn't just, take soldiers from the other side and, execute them or destroy all the high nobles just for the kicks and giggles of it. No. He also executed his own people, just civilians trying to live their own life as he tried to force his own morality on those he ruled over. So he had very, very high moral standards, ironically. Like, here he is, like, destroying and mutilating all these people. But don't worry, he's got high moral standards that must be enforced. Ugh, gosh. So Vlad would specifically target women when it came to enforcing his moral standards. Anything he deemed as a sexual transgression, such as adultery or premarital sex, would be punished to the extreme, like extreme. Like he would disfigure them in certain areas. I'm sure you can get what I'm hinting at. He would remove breasts, and those were very common forms of punishment that he would enact, along with his favorite, you guessed it, impaling. So if you were caught in adultery or having premarital sex, you could end up never looking the same again, or worst case scenario, being impaled and put on display for everyone to see. Now, he would also punish other civilians for dishonesty and any other moral failings. And I put that in air quotes, moral failings. I put it in air quotes because what are these moral failings? He never really specifies. It's just more of like, whatever Vlad thinks is immoral, you will be punished for if he catches you doing. Especially, like I said, for women. If they were caught in any of these dishonesty or anything, he held a special place to punish women. Like, I feel like he hated women. Probably because he didn't know his mom. It's probably mom trauma. That is my guess. But for individuals that he caught lying or any other moral failing that he deemed improper, these individuals, he actually would torture them by skinning them alive, exposing them to the elements, like putting them out in the severe cold. So if you know this area at all, like it can get pretty cold in the winter. And he also liked to expose them to wild animals, so wolves and that kind of thing. You just leave them out there on their own to fend for themselves. He would also boil them alive, just drop them into boiling oil and say farewell, I guess, because there's no way you're surviving that. And you guessed it, his ultimate favorite of impaling. So there were multiple different ways that you could suffer if your morality seemed to fail in Vlad's eyes. So there's actually a story of him executing a woman, mutilating her, then impaling her as a punishment for her infidelity. So I feel like if you knew that the possibility of getting mutilated and then impaled and killed because you cheated on your spouse, I feel like it would definitely decrease the amount of people cheating, for sure. I don't know if that's the right tactic to go about, just, skewering people and destroying their bodies, but, if it works for you, Vlad. So, anyways, he is known as a vicious, vicious, cruel leader. He used psychological tactics all the time in war, and he also would use different kinds of biological warfare. If someone was ill, he'd send them into the enemy's camp. Like, there's just a lot. So he, like I kind of mentioned, he was known for boiling people alive. He did that a lot with his enemies. And I want you to think back to an episode or two ago where we talked about Genghis Khan. Boiling enemies alive wasn't that uncommon. I know we haven't heard a lot about it outside of Genghis Khan, but in that era, like I said, life was super brutal. Everyone was super harsh. Like, consequences weren't just like slaps on the wrist. It was probably, death. So boiling people wasn't that uncommon in that time period. It's also said that he found out his own mistress. So yeah, he's trying to enforce these morality laws on all of his people while he's got his own mistress. It said he found out that she was pregnant, so he disemboweled her. Yeah, I mean, why not? She's breaking the moral laws, right? So, gotta stay consistent. Jeez. Now, there's also a story. Like I said, some of these records are hard to find, so some of these are just stories, so the validity, we don't fully know, but they're good stories, so we'll keep telling them. It said that he actually collected 24,000 noses from the bodies of his vanquished enemies. He would have people go and collect the noses to be like, oh, look how many people we killed. Woohoo, go us. Like, he is a psychotic madman. Or is he? It seems like he's a psychotic madman with all of this stuff that's going on, like boiling people, disemboweling, like skewering people, all of that makes him seem pretty psychotic. But, as I just mentioned, these were really harsh times and people were very brutal. So there's kind of a debate that goes on that, was he really psychotic and a madman, or was he just doing what he needed to do to survive? And if you think about that, like, he was in a very brutal environment, and the only way to survive would be to be brutal back, right? Now, I am not excusing any of his behavior. It is horrendous and awful. But when you look at it, as you should with most historical events and most historical things, you can't look at it from the view of, like, I'm sitting in my comfy house here in a nice, safe place. Like, I'm not having to fight off hordes of people trying to kidnap me or kill me all the time. So when you look at history and when we talk about these stories, you kind of have to put yourself in that position. He was in a very brutal environment, fighting for his life literally all the time between all of the enemies that he had. So was he being a sadistic, crazy man? Or was he literally just doing what he needed to do to survive? I'll let you decide. I'm not going to tell you I'll tell you eventually what I think, but not at this moment. I'm not going to tell you. I want you to ponder on it a little bit before I share my opinion. But he did all of this crazy, violent stuff to keep control over his people and instill fear in all of the people around him and in his own providence. He wanted to secure his reign, since it was so common in that area to have a new leader every 2 years. It was just a cycle. Like, we have a president every 4 years, except this is more like they kill the person and a new leader appears. So every 2 years, that's kind of what was happening. So he really wanted to secure that and secure the area and kind of calm it down and make it better. He also kept his power by getting rid of all the old royals, which we saw how he did that, impaling, surprise. And he replaced them with all new ones who were actually pulled from the middle class. And he did that on purpose because they owed their success to him, so they had to be loyal to Vlad. So he got rid of all the old guard, all the people who had fought against him and questioned his legitimacy on the throne. He just destroyed all of them, killed all of them, and brought in all new, fresh, quote-unquote, royalty because they were all from the middle class. They all owed him their loyalty. So there was a very specific family in this area called the Descenti, Dynasty. Sorry, dyslexic. Switch some of those letters. So Dynasty, the Dynasty clan was his biggest rival. They were the ones who fought back the hardest to try and lay claim to his throne. And he was not okay with that. He was so brutal to these people and literally decimated any town or any village that harbored any loyalty to the Dynasty clan. Just decimated them, wiped them out. If you showed any support, you were dead, basically. It said that Vlad captured the Dynasty prince and actually made him recite his own funeral oration before he was executed by Vlad. See, this man plays with people's minds and really likes to traumatize them in addition to harming them physically. Oh man. So he was trying to eliminate any kind of threat to his rule. So he was just brutal to just hold on to the small amount of power that he had. And in 1476, Vlad's life actually came to a super abrupt and violent end. Weird. This violent man met a violent end. I guess karma. He was killed and decapitated in an ambush on his way to fight another battle against the Ottomans. So they had actually ambushed him on his way to fight the Ottomans, and I ended up capturing him and just cutting off his head and decapitating him and removing the problem, basically. So they actually, when they decapitated him, sent Vlad's head to Mehmed II in Constantinople. They would display his head over the city gates as an example of Mehmed's conquering one of his greatest foes. They were basically bragging, see, no one can resist us for too long because, look, we got Vlad, this most violent, horrendous enemy of ours, we won. Now, Vlad, before he died, he always threatened people and said, if I get killed, if I lose my power, I will come back and seek vengeance on all of my enemies. So it was a pretty intense threat, to the point where after 2 years after his body had been buried, they actually dug up his body and it was nowhere to be found. They don't actually know where Vlad's body is. And to say that it freaked out his enemies would probably be an understatement. Like, they were terrified that this man had superpowers, had come back to life, and was going to come for them. So that's just a little bit of the myth of Mr. Vlad the Impaler. He was known for his ruthless, and disturbing tactics. And soon, these tactics and all the events that took place in Vlad's story, including things like cannibalism and just torturing people and so many things. There's a lot of details in this story about the awful, horrible things that he did to people that I just don't want to go into the details on. But all of these stories soon fell into legend. People slowly started forgetting about what happened until Brahm Stoker used his name as an inspiration for the character of Count Dracula. Count Dracula is the famous vampire, the one who sucks the blood from all the pretty ladies and turns other people into vampires. That was inspired by Vlad the Impaler. But for a very long time, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, people didn't know that Dracula was a real person. They just thought it was a story, a spooky story about this mythical creature with special powers. Well, the special powers came from this story of Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, who threatened his enemies that he would come back and seek his revenge and his bloodlust for all of these people that he murdered and slaughtered. And to me, personally, I feel like the real story of Vlad the Impaler is way scarier and way creepier than the story of Dracula, because the story of Dracula isn't real. Vlad the Impaler was real and did these things to people in real life. And it's horrifying to think about. Like, I still just have the image of the forest of bodies impaled, like covering so much land. Like, it's just terrifying. Anyways, so Vlad the Impaler is our horrible human in history this week because of the brutality that he showed to not only his enemies, but also to the people in his own stewardship. Like, he was just brutal and didn't care for people's lives. Literally treated everyone literally like a piece of meat. Like, literally, by skewering them. So that is why this week, Vlad the Impaler is our horrible human in history. And like I said, I might do another episode on this because there's a lot of prequel information that I skipped over because it's very confusing and convoluted, but I might in the future do another episode to kind of explain this a little bit deeper. So keep an eye out for that one. But join us next week. We are going to talk about, we haven't gone to the land down under yet, so we're going to head down to Australia and talk about one of their most notorious killers, Eric Edgar Cooke. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of Eric Edgar Cooke. He went from a petty thief to an arson to a murderer, killing at least 8 people in a killing spree that lasted between 1959 and 1963. So come learn the chilling tale of Eric Edgar Cook, or should we say, the Nightcrawler. It's going to be a good one, guys, so tune in, make sure you like, you follow, you subscribe, tell everybody who likes this true crime stuff to tune in because it's going to be amazing. Thanks for tuning in today, guys, and we'll see you next time on HHH for those horrible humans in history. See ya.